Well, welcome to Chapter 6 of Natural Bridges. In this chapter, we're going to start weaving together all of the things we've been learning and look at questions and listening and how all of those things come together for quality conversations. The chapter starts with this quote: "Your ability to skillfully engage in conversation determines the quality of your relationships." And I think this is such a great way to start the chapter because it's so true. Whether you're talking about business relationships or whether you're talking about family and friends and those types of relationships, our ability to converse well with others really shapes the depth and the health of those relationships. So, in this chapter, we're going to be looking at some different ways to really leverage this tool of conversation in order to build deeper relationships. First, here are some principles of conversation. The first one is to be others-centric. Now, you've probably noticed this is kind of a theme that we've been talking about in this class and in this book. To have really healthy relationships and great conversation, we need to learn to put the other person first, to be others-centric rather than self-centered. And when we can do this, what I've found in my personal life is that it's really modeled back. When people see that you're for them, they're for you. When people see that you're only for you, then they're only for them. So being able to be others-centric creates a really good atmosphere for conversation. Next, kind of like what we were talking about in our last chapter, we need to practice dialogue, not just this monologue where we're the only person talking, our opinion is the only one that matters, and they're just there to sit and watch and learn. That's not a relationship, and that's not conversation. So moving from a monologue, one person just talking and preaching and lecturing at someone else, to a dialogue, people going back and forth and sharing ideas. The next is leveraging questions. Being able to, from our last chapter, the 4 different types of questions, being able to use those types of questions when they're appropriate to the conversation to keep the conversation going. So remember, we had closed questions, things that could only be answered with yes or no. We had open-ended questions, things that require a more developed response. And then we had probing questions. So you ask a question and it's kind of a follow-up to learn a little bit more about what they're saying. And then the fourth one, we learned to stay away from loaded questions. But those first 3, really mastering those and putting them into conversation is going to bring this whole thing together. It's going to help you listen well, and it's going to give you something to listen to. And then last is self-monitoring. Sometimes we get so excited and we want to share and we want to seem smart and funny and cool, and so we just keep talking and talking and talking, and we gotta learn to self-monitor. In our conversation, we don't do this naturally, but every once in a while to start practicing just in your head thinking, have I been talking too much? Have I been talking more than the other person? And we don't want to do this to an unhealthy degree. We don't want to get in our heads too much and always be like, oh man, should I have said that? I think I said too many sentences. But every once in a while, in conversation, just kind of check in with yourself and real briefly think, man, have I been talking more than them? Or is it pretty even? Or have I been honoring them and letting them share? And just once in a conversation, just kind of mentally check in with yourself and make sure that you're being selfless and you're being flexible in the conversation. Now, the next thing we're going to look at, and this was kind of the bulk part of the chapter, are the 3 parts of a conversation. And it's just like in life. It's just like a good story. There's a beginning, a middle, and an end. And I'm going to walk you through how to do this. So if you're someone who you don't know how to start conversations, Or maybe you're really good at starting them, but you don't know what to say in the middle of it. Or my favorite, at the very end. You're great at doing all the other stuff, but you just don't know how to get the goodbye going. You don't know how to kind of land the plane and end the conversation. We're going to look at each of those parts right now. The first is the welcome. This is how to start a conversation. And the first thing you want to do is be aware of others. It's hard to start a conversation if you're not aware of the people around you. So some ways to do this is start by putting your phone away. It's one of the easiest things. Or take your headphones out. And when you're walking around campus, or you're in the mall, or you're at a family gathering, be aware of what's going on around you and who you could potentially engage with. And then the next step is to greet them, to actually initiate a conversation. Maybe you're in the workplace, or you're at a barbecue with some neighbors and you're aware of them, so you see it. The next thing to do is to take a step forward and ask them how they're doing. Start a little conversation. And with our face, remember we were talking about nonverbals, we want to express nonverbally that we are open to conversation. One of the best ways to do this is to smile. Just to have a cheerful look about you is super inviting. And it's more of a welcome mat than to sit there with your phone out, looking around, kind of sighing, kind of making eye contact and then looking down. That's like a no trespassing sign. Non-verbally, you're saying, I don't want to connect, I don't want to talk, and it's hard for people to engage with you. So either make sure your nonverbals are welcoming, and if that's not working, go and initiate conversation with someone else. The third part is using openers. So you're looking around, you're having good nonverbals, now what do you do? How do you actually start the conversation? Well, look at these three things. You could use a question on the location, the occasion, or the situation. So let's start with location. Maybe you say something like, hey, do you come to this campsite often? Or, hey, who do you know at this party? So you're talking about where you physically are, or what bus are you waiting for? You know, something like that, where you're talking about the location that you're at. The second one is the occasion. Maybe you're at a wedding and just say, hey, so who do you know of the wedding? Or you're at a graduation party and you say, hey, how do you know Sarah? How are you connected? Or, hey man, this is a great party, huh? How are you doing here? And then the third one is the situation. Now, the situation can be used for a real specific purpose where you want to clarify instructions or you want to resolve an issue. There's a situation that you want to talk about. And in the work world, this may look like your boss tells you to do something and that's the situation, and you ask a clarifying question. Hey, I just wanted to check in. Am I doing this well? Am I doing this right? Is this what you had in mind? So all of those are ways to start the conversation. Now let's look at the body of the conversation. The body of the conversation is how to extend the conversation. So, first, probing questions. Remember, we just talked about these. These help develop more answers based on something they said. So once you've started the conversation and you're kind of flowing a little bit, the pleasantries have started to die down, maybe put some probing questions in and get more information on whatever you're talking about. So you're at a wedding and you say, how do you know the bride or the groom? And they say, well, I was their roommate. Let's ask a probing question. Wow, what was that like to room with Jeremy? You know, and you start talking about that and ask some more follow-up questions, and that'll build the body. The next is confirming responses. You want to validate the speaker, both with your nonverbals and verbals. You know, give them a head nod, smile, make direct eye contact while they're talking, and say things like, oh, no way, really? Tell me more about that. And verbally, you validate what they're saying and encourage them to speak more. And finally, flexibility. This is a word we're seeing a lot in this class. But we need to be really flexible with the duration and the depth and the direction of the conversation. Maybe the person wants to go on a real deep level, and we got to be flexible to do that, even if we're kind of in a more lighthearted mood, or vice versa. Maybe we're really introspective and we've been having these really deep thoughts, and you're at a birthday party and the other person is more surface level. We need to learn to match and pace them and what they want to talk about, because it's really awkward and it's hard if we're on a different wavelength as the other person. And as we've been learning in this class, it's our job to adapt to others. And here's why I say that. We've been talking a lot about selflessness. The reason we want to do that is because other people might not have this training that you have. They might not know how to pace and to put you first or to ask good questions. So not only do we want to do it just to have good conversations, we also want to model this and lead by example. We want to show people how to have great conversations. And after a while, they'll start to pick up on some of these things that you are learning, and it's going to become second nature soon. So you are becoming a teacher to the people around you of how to have great conversations. Now, the final part, this is the most fun. How to say the goodbye, how to land the plane and end a conversation. The first, and these will go in degrees of severity, the first is just to summarize the conversation, to briefly recap what was said, and then kind of be silent for a second. Stop the questions, stop trying to build the body. We're now in the final chapter of the book of conversation, right? So maybe you've been talking and you're in a meeting and you say, okay, well that sounds good. It sounds like you're going to do X and you're going to do Y and you're going to do Z. I think that sounds really nice. And then pause for a minute. Now, most people will pick up on these social cues, and it doesn't even have to be in a meeting. It could be something like a casual conversation with a friend, and you're talking about your plans for the weekend, and you say, man, that sounds great. Sounds like you're gonna go out and have a nice barbecue this week, and I hope you have so much fun. It's good seeing you. And then pause. Most people will get that. That will be a pretty common way to end a conversation, but sometimes it's a little more difficult. Sometimes you need to issue an invitation. Now, if someone keeps talking after you've tried to land the plane, this can be a great thing to do. Say, recap, summarize, and say, well, it sounds like you're gonna go barbecue this weekend. That sounds really fun. Hey, let's check in on Monday. Let me know how that goes. By doing that, most people at this point, if they didn't get the summarize, when you issue an invitation, it kind of shows that you're coming to a close here and you're gonna pick it up later. So hey, keep in touch. Let me know how that goes. And then again, taking a step back, letting there be a little pause, and then most times conversation will end. Now, every once in a while, there's someone who's not reading social cues and these first two don't work. Now it's time to be direct. This one can be a little awkward, but it doesn't leave any room for misunderstanding. You can say things like, well, I have another meeting to get to, if you really do, or I got some things I got to do. I was planning on this. Or kind of a polite way to be direct is saying, hey, I'm going to let you go now. I mean, we've been talking for a little bit. I'm going to let you get back to stuff, but it was really good seeing you. Now, it's a little awkward sometimes to be direct if that's not your normal tendency, but, well, it's better than being stuck for 2 hours in a conversation that you don't have time for because you're at work and you need to go do work, or you're at school and you've got a class to get to. So if the first two don't work, 1 or 2 times around, then it's time to be direct, and that's how you land the plane of conversation. This chapter kind of summed up a few of the things that we've been learning, and it weaves it all together to show us how to use questions, how to be an active listener, and how to land the plane. So what I want you to do this week is try to engage in a conversation and use some of these new tools. Be flexible in the conversation, be others-centric, and ask great questions. And I think when you do, You're going to learn something cool. You're going to learn something new because you're listening and learning from others. I hope you have a great week, and to end this conversation, it's time for me to go. I got another class to get to. So I wish you the best of luck, and I'll see you soon.